Alright guys, let's talk about the comeback of Royal Knights. First and foremost, Digi-Egg cards, you definitely run the king himself, Yggdrasil, 4 copies, no more and no less. This is the core bread and butter strategy that allows you to play your Royal Knights and hard play them by reducing their play cost. The more sources you have underneath Yggdrasil, the more you get to reduce, starting with 4 and then 5, 6 and so on. And it can scale infinitely for every source it has. By playing your Royal Knights with reduced cost, this is how you can utilize their on-play effects and control the board and control the momentum. Keep in mind, you cannot digivolve any of your Digimon during your own turn as long as this egg is face up. At the every start of your main phase, you're going to reveal another Yggdrasil and tuck it underneath. Despite whether you're able to continuously tuck more Yggdrasils from your Digi-Egg deck underneath the stack or not, every start on main phase, you always will have to tuck in all your Royal Knight trait Digimon in the battle area underneath Yggdrasil. And that is just mainly the core strategy of the deck to balance it so that when you're playing your Royal Knights for reduced cost, they can't really stick on the board either to make continuous attacks. Otherwise, it's a little bit too overpowered. And then it has an inheritable effect as well in breeding, which gives you memory back whenever you place a Royal Knight trait option card in your battle area. Since you stack up to 3 Yggdrasils underneath it, you can constantly gain 3 memory once per turn whenever you do so. Also, don't forget to watch the newest Battle Vault episode, which features the Royal Knights fighting against the 7th grade Demon Lords in order to save the digital world. In that video, you guys can also find exclusive promo codes to the AVAULT store as well, so make sure to check it out. But that's it with Yggdrasil. Let's go ahead and start talking about our level 4s because this deck does not run any level 3s in my current build. Starting with the all-new omnimon from BT20, which you want to run 4 copies of, it has blocker. When you play out this card, if you have 1 or fewer security, you get to digivolve into an Omnimon X from your hand, ignoring the Digivolution requirements and not having to pay the costs. When this card is played out and you have 1 or fewer security, you can warp Digivolve straight into an Omni X, ignoring its Digivolution requirements and without paying the cost. Of course, the intention is to help us get into the BT20 Omnimon X, which I'll talk about later. It also has an undeletion effect, which lets you tuck itself underneath Yggdrasil so you can add up additional sources to help you further reduce your Royal Knight play costs. Lastly, it has an inheritable. While it is underneath Yggdrasil in the breeding area, whenever you lose a security stack, you can suspend your Yggdrasil to actually play the omnimon from the source of Yggdrasil out. During your opponent's turn, if they attack into you while you have 1 or fewer security and this omnimon is underneath Yggdrasil's source, suspend it so you can play it out. And then because you have 1 or fewer security, you get to digivolve into Omni X from your hand. Keep in mind, Yggdrasil only prevents you from digivolving during your own turn. But with this new omnimon, you get to digivolve during your opponent's turn, effectively making Omnimon X like a counter ace against your opponents that they don't see coming, and it does not have ace overflow. If you're still kind of confused, don't worry, I'll show you guys exactly how this works in the combos later on too. And it's just crazy to see how many effects are packed into just a single level 4, which is certainly a must-have and a fantastic addition into this archetype. Speaking of omnimons, I'm still running 3 copies of the older BT13 omnimon, just because when you play it, you get to draw a card, and whenever it's deleted, you get to tuck sources underneath as well to continue ramping up your Yggdrasil. And then to round up for all the level 4s, let's begin talking about our Royal Knights, and starting off 4 copies of the BT13 Magnemon. Just to give you the additional draw power, it's the lowest play cost Royal Knight that you want to see as early in the stages as possible so you can play it out, get tucked under, and help you cycle through your deck. Ideally, this is a card that you want to see in your opening hand and play out in your first turn so that you can continue to ramp up as quickly as possible. And then moving on to the other Royal Knights, which are all going to be level 6s, where we don't play any level 5s whatsoever in this deck. There's 3 copies of Lord Knightmon from BT19. When you play out Lord Knightmon, it also lets you play out any level 4 or lower Digimon card back from your trash. It can be any color as well. That mainly means you want to bring your omnimon back. Otherwise, you can bring Magnemon back as well if it ever was deleted. Its secondary effect lets you redirect one of your opponent's attack into any Royal Knight trait Digimon that you have, which is a good source of defense to prevent your opponents from rushing you down. Next, I'm running 2 copies of the BT13 Dynasmon. This is another fantastic card that helps you open up as you get to search by revealing the top 4 cards of your deck, grabbing 2 any Royal Knight trait pieces, and then trashing the rest. Its secondary effect is whenever you play another Royal Knight trait Digimon afterwards, you get to delete all your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, board wiping any Rookie Rush strategies that they may have. Next, I'm running 3 copies of the BT13 Gankomon. It's a 13k blocker, which is great for early game defense, but it also lets you play a source from Yggdrasil out for free. You get to utilize the on-play effects of your Royal Knights off of it too. But keep in mind, you cannot play a Gankomon or a Omnimon off this effect, because otherwise it will be just too powerful as you keep looping it over and over again. Speaking of Gankomon, there's also his apprentice, Jesmon, where I'm running 2 copies of the BT20 one. Whenever you play out this card, you get to play out the token alongside with it, which has reboot blocker, great for defending, and it also has decoy for any of your red and black Digimon, which the Royal Knight trait deck now plays quite a number of. Keep in mind, you're not going to be able to use the last effect of Jesmon as often just to make an attack, just because it doesn't have rush itself. Next, I also got 2 copies of the BT13 Gallantmon, still a very good card on its own, just because it can reduce its own play cost when you don't have any Digimon on your side of the board. As the late game stages go, you can easily play this card for free, especially when you synergize the cost reduction alongside with Yggdrasil. And when you play this card out, you can delete 6k or lower, if not delete 13k or higher, and then you also get to rush and attack and repeat the same effect again to delete more things. Speaking of Gallantmon, there's also his cousin, which is Medieval Gallantmon from EX8, which I'm running 2 copies of. Even though Medieval Gallantmon is not a Royal Knight trait, so you can't reduce its play cost off Yggdrasil, itself can still always reduce its own play cost. Pretty much a 7 cost hard drop there, and then you can just easily get rid of 2 of your opponent's Digimon with its effect, which is really powerful. And as we all know, it's a pretty strong staple to include. Then to round off for the rest of the level 6 Royal Knights, I'm running 2 copies of the BT13 Leopardmon. With its main effect, you can always reduce your Royal Knight trait Digimon that you play out by another 4 costs. You can also stack it alongside with Yggdrasil as well. And whenever you play another Digimon after Leopardmon, you get to give all your Royal Knight trait blocker until the end of the opponent's turn. This is of course always a card that's really strong as it synergizes with Omnimon, which you can play out easily. And speaking of Omnimons, as we move on to level 7s, still gotta play the 4 copies of the one from BT13. This is your main win condition card as you reduce its play cost heavily with Yggdrasil, and once you're ready, you want to delete your Yggdrasil, play it out, and play all the sources underneath it with different Royal Knights. Everything on the board gains rush, and that is exactly the moment where you start swinging with all of them, finishing your opponents off with wide barrage of attacks. Otherwise, the secondary usage of this card is that you want to play out in the mid stages of the games if you ever need to instantly delete anything on your opponent's side of the board. And then now this Omnimon can ascend to a whole new X antibody form with the BT20 Omnimon X. And certainly you also want to run 4 copies of it. It actually does a ton. By Digi-Evolving on top of your regular Omnimon for 2 costs, this card has Raid, Piercing, and Blocker, giving you all your offensive and defensive tools that you need. When you Digi-Evolve into it, if Omnimon or X Antibody is underneath the sources, which by the way, the new Omekamon counts as X Antibody itself, so it can fulfill that requirement, you get to choose one of your own Digimon and one of your opponent's Digimon and wipe everything else out. Afterwards, regardless if you had an Omnimon or X Antibody in the source, you always get to bottom deck one of your opponent's Digimon too. And that is just absolutely crazy because it's all delete on legs. But that's not all. At the end of turn, you get to give any one of your Digimon rush, allowing it to attack without suspending as well. This new card alone gives the archetype a whole new way to turn the tide of the game into your own favor all by itself. But I am not done with level 7s just yet because there's more to talk about with the new ones, starting with Alphamon Oryakin Ace, which I'm running 2 copies of. This is the second lowest play cost Royal Knight that you would play in the deck, and alongside with the reduction of Yggdrasil, you can play it out for very cheaply. And for that, you can immediately minus 15k on your opponent's Digimon that lasts until the end of their turn. Otherwise, the secondary usage of this card is that whenever you go for the Omnimon combo and play out multiple level 6s, you can easily just DNA with a red and a black Digimon to get into it to further trash your opponent's security, recover yourself, and gain additional memory. Of course, I'm not playing any Alphamons or Oreomons, so we're not going to be able to blast DNA Digivolve against the opponents. But that is exactly where Jesmon GX comes in with the new Ace form as well, which I'm running 1 copy of. Since we do play a handful of red and black Digimon, we can easily just blast Digivolve into this card to counter against the opponents. One of the really cool rulings when it comes to Royal Knight trait Aces and Yggdrasil is that when it gets tucked underneath, you're not going to lose memory off the Ace overflow. However, if that Ace card ever leaves the battle area, including under the breeding with Yggdrasil, you're going to have to pay for that Ace overflow. That's why it's really important to make sure that you don't accidentally stack up multiples of the same name underneath Yggdrasil whenever you go for the Omnimon play. But back to Jesmon GX, the main counter is to remove your opponent's Digimon with anything that's 16k or lower, And just like Orican Ace, you always have the option to DNA with a Jesmon and Genkumon that you have on the board yourself after going for the Omni play. That's it for all our Digimon. Now let's talk about our Tamer, where there's the all-new BT20 Cool Boy, which you must have 4 copies of in your deck. This card gives you so much value because whenever you play a Royal Knight trait Digimon, you get to suspend it to gain a memory and draw a card. That's why if you have more on the board and multiple copies, even better it is for you. His secondary effect lets you play Omekamons for free during the opponent's turn whenever your Royal Knight trait Digimon will leave the battle area. And by doing that, you can play the new Omekamon to block, or you can play the older Omekamon to instantly draw a card, and that way you have a body that's ready to swing into your opponent's security and continue to chip them down. And that's it, as Cool Boy is the only Tamer that I'm running. As we move on to the options, I want to talk about the new one, the Last Guardian. This is a fantastic starting card that you want to see in your opening hand as well, because it helps you search, grabbing you Cool Boy and a Royal Knight trait or X antibody Digimon as well, so you can potentially get 2 hits. And the neat thing is that you can also grab your Omekamons because they have X antibody in their trait. And with its delay, you get to give protection to one of your Omnimons from leaving the battle area. And that also includes if it ever would leave from your own effect, which is actually pretty important for a very specific combo that I'll show you guys later too. Lastly, a security effect lets you play a Cool Boy or Omekamon from hand or trash for free, and then you set this option card in your battle area. And then to round off for the rest of the options, still running the 4 copies of Royal Knights of the Purge, just to draw additional cards and tuck sources underneath so that we can always utilize its delay effect to play more Royal Knights from underneath the sources. Keep in mind, we don't get on-play effects off of that. However, we still get to make an extra attack with Rush. Other cards that you guys can also be including for the Royal Knights deck. Now, there is just so many different Royal Knight trait Digimon out there, which really allows you guys to customize the build to your own liking, or really show off the specific playstyle that you're trying to go for. And here are some of my suggestions. The first one will be All Force Digimon from BT13, just because the deck right now has a lot of on-deletion effects. Therefore, you might want to include it just to strip some sources, but also provide some bouncing effects just in case it plays around anything that your opponents benefit from deletion. There's also the BT20 Alphamon, which I've considered adding just because you can recover instantly when you play it, or whenever a security is removed, you can instantly DP reduce something by AK on your opponent's side. Next, I want to talk about the BT13 Alphamon, just to give you that 1-turn coverage in case if your opponent is about to end you with anything that's 10 cost or higher, which is very commonly still seen. And being able to buy yourself that 1 turn can always be helpful to add additional sources, or the Alphamon itself can be sticky on the board so that it can stay on there for 1 more turn so that you can chip away with it too. T13 Craniumon is also great because it's a blocker which is immune to all your opponent's Digimon effects, and at the end of the opponent's turn, you get to force something to attack so you can block immediately to take out your opponent's Digimon. There's also the OG Craniumon from BT3, which gives you coverage against any deletion effects from your opponent, and just by standing that blocker there, gives you that defense too. Aside from the other 2 level 7 aces which we talked about in the main deck, you can also still consider running the Gallantmon Crimson ace, which was initially included before BT20 came. Not only this card is really good at removing your opponent's Digimon when you blast counter against them, it is also not a Royal Knight trait Digimon, meaning it's not going to get tucked in off Yggdrasil's effect at the starter main, so that you can keep it on the board and you can go for attacks to trash your opponent's security depending on how many cards are in both players' trash, which is really good at dealing early game and mid game damage to help you set up for lethal winning conditions. Alright, combos and how to play the all-new Royal Knights deck. Let's start with the opening hand of cards that you want to see. Cool Boy, Last Guardian, Omekamon, Magnamon. These are the cards that help us search and draw cards that we want to establish on the board as soon as possible to find our pieces. Eventually, I want to go into Lord Nightmon, which can always play out Magnamon or any of the Omekamon so we can continue to draw. Dynasmon is also a fantastic searcher in the early stages to fetch us any 2 of the pieces that we need to continue to play as well. Eventually, we want to stack up a lot of sources underneath our Yggdrasil so then we can go ahead and play Omnimon for reduced cost, establish a wide board with all the Royal Knights, and finish the opponents off. For combo number 1, it's just more of a showcase of how the new Omekamon works when it comes to having 1 or fewer security and how you can actually get into Omni X during your opponent's turn. A little bit unusual because I'm showcasing how this all works specifically during the opponent's turn. Assuming they have 1 or more memory, it doesn't really matter, but they attack with a Digimon with 6k or higher and your Omekamon has blocker. We're going to go ahead and block the attack, and when it gets deleted, it gets this on deletion effect to tuck underneath Yggdrasil. Assuming our opponent has lethal currently on the board, they're going to continue to finish it off and attack our security. Checking out this one, Magnamon, and since now we have 1 or fewer, and with the Omekamon inheritor effect breeding during the opponent's turn when a security stack is removed, we get to suspend this Digimon, meaning we get to suspend Yggdrasil to then play out a Omecamon from the sources, which will play back this particular Omecamon. And since we are 1 at fewer security at this moment, Omecamon's on play effect is going to kick in, allowing us to Digivolve into Omnimon X antibody. And the really cool thing is that Yggdrasil normally prevents you from Digivolving, but that is only during your own turn. Since we're Digivolving during the opponent's turn, this makes this combo achievable. And once we get into Omnimon X antibody, because Omecamon has the rule trait of being as an X antibody, we get to resolve all the effects of Omni X. On Digivolve, we get to choose one Digimon on both player sides. Of course, we're going to choose our own here and then choose one of our opponent's Digimon and wipe everything out. Afterwards, we're going to bottom deck exactly that Digimon as well. Assuming if the opponent has aces, this is where we remove them and they have no protection, we steal the turn back. Or if not, they're basically forced to replay at the beginning all over again to establish their board. And this is how this Omni X Omecamon works all together, with Yggdrasil giving the deck a whole new dynamic to play with, which is really, really cool. For combo number 2, I'm going to show you guys the old classic of how you can utilize Leopardmon and Omnimon from BT13 to further reduce its play cost and basically just finish your opponents out of nowhere. All you really need is 4 different Royal Knight names underneath Yggdrasil in order to even achieve this, and as well as an Omecamon or any level 4 in the trash that you want to utilize. So we're going to go ahead and have the Royal Knights of the Purge set up as well prior. We want to go ahead and use the delay effect to play out Leopardmon for free. Although we don't gain on-play effects off of Purge, Leopardmon's effect is actually a main once per turn. So now we get to go ahead and use it to attempt to play Omnimon with the cost reduction of 4, and with Yggdrasil, we get to reduce it further by 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, meaning it's completely free. You want to make sure that you're still keeping turn. However, you want to be at least 1 memory or 0 memory even at the spot to finish your opponents off, because you're going to go ahead and keep turn and attack. We're going to go ahead and delete the Yggdrasil and play out all the different Royal Knights. Now we're going to get to resolve all their on-play effects. Jesmon's going to let us play out a token here, and then we're going to go ahead and use Lord Knightmon to play out any level 4 back from the trash. That's why it's important to have like an Omecamon or another Magnamon. And now at this moment, Omnimon gives everything rush in this turn so that we can go ahead and attack. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attacks in total. Depending on what Royal Knights we played, we can easily just finish the opponents off and go for the game-winning attacks. For this next combo, I want to show you guys the other explosive capability of Royal Knights on how it scales into late game once you rack up a lot of sources underneath Yggdrasil, and 1 memory is really all you need as you get to board wipe your opponents and finish them off like crazy. This time we're going to have Cool Boy and the Last Guardian to showcase this as well, but ultimately you want to make sure that you can play out this Omnimon for free, aside from just using the Leopardmon combo from we saw earlier. Since they are a total reduction of 14 now, we play out the Omnimon here. We get to suspend the Cool Boy as soon as we play the Omnimon to gain a memory and draw a card. Having 2 memory is pretty important because it gives us the flexibility to make even more plays. So we're going to go ahead and use that, and then we're going to go ahead and play out all the different Royal Knights that we have underneath Yggdrasil. With all these different names, this is again overkill combo here, but depending on what the opponent has on the board, we might sometimes want to remove their stuff. First off, let's go ahead and use Gallantmon to pop something with 6k or less, or otherwise 13k or higher. Gankomon is not going to be able to resolve because we don't have anything to play underneath Yggdrasil, nor that we have Sistermons in our deck either. We get to use Jesmon to play out a token off of it. We get to use Dynasmon to search. And because of its second effect, we did play something out, we also get to delete the opponent's board, everything that they have that is level 4 or lower. And then lastly, we still have Lord Knightmon, which we actually can play out this Omecamon too. And this is one of the crazy things with this new Omecamon, because now it's on play and we have 1 or fewer security, and we no longer have Yggdrasil. This is where we can have the option to go into our Omni X ourselves this particular turn. Now keep in mind, if we do, we're going to board wipe ourselves, and it depends on the opponent's board. Sometimes you might want to board wipe yourself just for the sake of bottom decking the opponent's Digimon, depending on the matchup, to play around on deletion effects and whatnot. And remember, if we ever do go for that, we get to Digivolve here. Let's just say, and go ahead, we choose Gallantmon Stay here in particular. This is where Omni X is going to kick in and delete everything else, including itself, but we can use the Last Guardian to protect it. Not the most optimal play right here, but let's just go ahead and keep going with this on play effect. Again, depending on the situation, this is where we even have the different choices we can get into first to further board clear the opponent. This is why I play Jesmon GX Ace, because we can go ahead and DNA ourselves, and then we can tuck in like another Royal Knight, delete something with 16k or lower. When we swing, we get to trash for security. We also have the option to actually use Lord Knightmon and Gallantmon to DNA into Alphamon Oriokin as well, because all it needs is a black source, which is going to be a Lord Knightmon, with a yellow or red, which is going to be Gallantmon. Minus something by 15k, recover a security, and also trash a security on the opponent's side, and then gain additional 3 memory back here. And then at this moment, we can just sequence our attacks however you kind of like, just to make sure that you can achieve your win condition, playing mostly around the opponent's security and the opponent's board, whatever Digimon that they have. But with this amount of removal, it is just absolutely insane. Again, if you really want to go into, you can still also have the choice to go into Omnimon X instead of just Omekamon, and then do the same thing again. But keep in mind, whenever you go into Omni X, you are going to clear your own board, so you want to be thoughtful and be careful that you don't sort of give your opponent Ace Overflow just because this turn is intended to be the final turn to finish the opponents off. So make sure to play around that. But that's it. This crazy board, you just go ahead and swing, attack, and finish your opponents off, which is just absolutely insane, and it's just overkill. And this is how crazy the new combos that the Royal Knights deck can pull off. Make sure to get your very own Initialized Spark collection on the AVAULT store right now, and definitely watch the latest Battle Vault episode to get exclusive discount codes for this latest drop. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.